Angela Brooks had always believed in building things slowly. Not just careers or savings, but people. She believed that with enough patience, enough love, and enough sacrifice, you could help someone become who they were meant to be. That belief was the reason she met Daniel. He was standing outside a small corner cafe on a cold October evening, arguing on the phone with someone who clearly wasn't listening. His voice carried frustration, not anger. When he hung up, he didn't storm off. He just stood there, staring at nothing, like a man trying to piece together a future that kept slipping through his fingers. Angela noticed that kind of silence. "You okay?" she asked, stepping out with her coffee. Daniel looked at her, surprised. Then he let out a tired breath. "Yeah, just life." She smiled, not out of politeness, but recognition. Life does that sometimes. That was how it started. No grand moment. No sparks. Just two people, both a little worn down, finding comfort in conversation. Over time, Angela learned his story. He had big ideas, always had. Business plans scribbled on napkins, late-night notes filled with numbers and possibilities. But nothing had worked yet. Every attempt seemed to fall apart just when it mattered most. "I know it sounds crazy," Daniel said one night, sitting across from her in her small apartment, "but I can see it. I know I can build something real. I just need time." Angela didn't laugh. She didn't doubt him. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady. "Then take the time," she said. "I'll help you." And she meant it. Angela was practical. She worked long shifts at a healthcare clinic, steady job, modest pay, but reliable. She had plans for herself once. Further education, maybe starting her own practice someday. But those plans began to shift, slowly at first, then completely. Because Daniel needed support. At first, it was small things. Covering dinner when he was short on cash. Letting him use her laptop when his broke. Encouraging him when he felt like quitting. Then it became more. She picked up extra shifts so he wouldn't have to take a job that would distract him. She paid bills he couldn't. She listened to every idea, every plan, every failure. "You're the only one who believes in me," Daniel told her once, his voice quiet, almost ashamed. Angela reached for his hand. "That's enough. You just need one person sometimes." They got married in a simple ceremony. No luxury, no grand celebration. Just a promise. Angela wore a dress she bought on sale. Daniel borrowed a suit. They stood in front of a small group of friends, holding on to hope more than anything else. The early years were hard. Bills stacked up faster than income. Angela worked mornings, evenings, sometimes nights. Daniel worked too, but his focus was always split between survival and ambition. He would come home late, sit at the table, and spread out papers filled with ideas. "Look at this," he would say, eyes lighting up. "If this works, everything changes." Angela would sit beside him, even when she was exhausted. She would listen, ask questions, offer suggestions. Not because she understood everything, but because she understood him. Slowly, something began to shift. One of Daniel's ideas started gaining traction. It wasn't instant success, but it was different. There was interest. Small wins. A few investors. For the first time, his plans weren't just dreams. "I think this might be it," he said one night, almost afraid to believe it. Angela smiled, though her eyes were tired. "I told you. You just needed time." Time turned into progress. Progress turned into stability. And stability, into success. They moved out of the small apartment into a better place. Not extravagant, but comfortable. Daniel started dressing differently. Talking differently. Carrying himself with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Angela noticed the change. At first, she was proud. "You did it," she told him, standing in their new living room, sunlight pouring through the windows. "We did it," Daniel corrected, but his tone was distant, distracted. It was subtle. The shift. He started coming home later. Meetings, he said. Networking events. Opportunities. His phone was always buzzing, always just out of reach. Angela didn't question it at first. She trusted him. That trust had been built over years, layer by layer. But something felt different. One evening, she sat alone at the dinner table, the food growing cold. The clock ticked past 10. Then 11. Her phone remained silent. When the door finally opened, Daniel walked in without looking at her. "You're late," she said softly.
"Yeah,
"I told you I had a meeting. You didn't say it would be this late." He shrugged, loosening his tie. "Things came up." Angela studied him for a moment. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Angela. Just tired." The conversation ended there. Moments like that began to repeat. Small cracks, barely noticeable at first, but growing. He stopped asking about her day. Stopped sitting with her at the table. His world was expanding, and somehow, she wasn't part of it anymore. One night, as he left his phone on the counter and stepped into the shower, a message lit up the screen. Angela wasn't the type to invade privacy. She never had been. But something about the way his behavior had changed, the distance, the silence, it unsettled her. The screen dimmed. She looked away. Then it lit up again. This time, she saw just enough. A name she didn't recognize. A message that didn't belong in a professional conversation. Her chest tightened. She didn't open it. Didn't scroll. She just stood there, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. For the first time in years, doubt crept in. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet and steady. The kind that doesn't leave. When Daniel came back into the room, towel over his shoulder, he found her exactly where she was. "Everything okay?" he asked. Angela turned to him slowly, her voice calm, but her eyes searching. "Who is she?" Daniel froze, just for a second. Then he laughed, too quickly. "What are you talking about?" Angela didn't raise her voice. Didn't accuse. She simply held his gaze. "I didn't ask what I'm talking about," she said. "I asked who she is." Silence filled the room. And for the first time since she had met him, Daniel didn't have an answer ready. Something had shifted. Not loudly. Not completely. But enough to change everything that came next. The silence between them didn't feel temporary. It felt like something had cracked open, something that had been quietly building for months and had finally found its way to the surface. Daniel looked at her, then away, then back again. That hesitation told Angela more than any confession could. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice measured, careful. Angela let out a faint breath. "Then explain it to me." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room before stopping near the window. "She's just someone I work with. We've been collaborating on a few things. That's all." Angela didn't move. "And that message?" He exhaled sharply. "You shouldn't be going through my phone." "I didn't go through it," she replied, her tone steady. "It lit up. I saw it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's nothing serious." That word, nothing, landed harder than anything else. Angela stepped closer, her voice still calm but firmer now. "You don't text someone like that if it's nothing." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at her like he was weighing how much truth he could afford to give. "It just happened," he said finally. "I didn't plan it." Angela blinked, absorbing the words slowly. "So there is something." Daniel didn't deny it this time. The room seemed smaller all of a sudden, like the walls had moved closer without warning. "How long?" she asked. He hesitated again, and that pause stretched long enough to hurt. "A few months." Angela let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. A few months, she repeated. And you've been coming home, sitting across from me, eating dinner with me, like nothing changed. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. I didn't want to hurt you. The irony stung. You didn't want to hurt me, she said, her voice still controlled, though her eyes had begun to glisten. So you lied to me every single day. He turned away. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. Angela stared at him, disbelief settling in. That's the same thing, Daniel. He didn't argue. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything unsaid hung heavy in the air. Then Angela asked the question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Do you love her? Daniel didn't respond right away. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. I don't know, he said eventually. That answer hurt more than a yes. Angela swallowed, forcing herself to stay composed. Do you love me? Daniel looked up at her, and for a brief second, there was something familiar in his eyes. Something that reminded her of the man she had stood beside all those years ago. But it didn't last. I care about you, he said. Angela felt something inside her sink. Care, she echoed. After everything, that's what it is now? He didn't flinch. Things change, Angela. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to process a language she no longer understood. No. People choose to change. Daniel pushed himself off the counter, his patience thinning. Look, I didn't come home to have this kind of interrogation. Interrogation, she repeated, her voice rising slightly for the first time. I'm your wife. I deserve answers. And I gave you one, he snapped. It happened. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it to get this complicated. Angela took a step back, as if the words had physically pushed her. Complicated, she said quietly. This is your marriage, Daniel. It's supposed to matter. He sighed, rubbing his temples. It did matter. It just doesn't feel the same anymore. There it was. Clear. Direct. Final. Angela felt the last piece of denial slip away. All those years, she said softly, more to herself than to him. Everything we built, everything I gave up. Daniel didn't respond. She looked at him, really looked this time, and realized something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. He wasn't the same man. Not just different. Not just changed. Gone. What do you want, she asked, her voice steady again, though her heart was anything but. Daniel hesitated, but not for long. I think it's better if we separate. The word landed cold. Angela stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, any hesitation, anything that suggested he didn't mean it. There was nothing. You're serious, she said. He nodded. It's for the best. For who, she asked. For both of us, he replied, though the answer felt rehearsed. Angela let out a slow breath, trying to hold on to her composure. And what happens to me? Daniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, where am I supposed to go, she asked. This is my home too. He looked uncomfortable now, shifting his weight. I'll give you some time to figure things out. How much time, she pressed. A few days. Maybe a week. Angela stared at him, disbelief turning into something sharper. A week, she repeated. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed, you're giving me a week to leave my own home? It's not like that, he said quickly. I just think it's better if we move on. Move on, she echoed, her voice hollow. Daniel's tone hardened slightly. Angela, dragging this out isn't going to help anyone. She let out a quiet breath, her hands trembling slightly now, though she kept them at her sides. You're asking me to walk away from my life, she said. From everything I helped build. You'll figure something out, he replied. You always do. The words were meant to sound reassuring. They didn't. Angela looked at him for a long moment, the weight of years pressing down on her all at once. I stood by you when you had nothing, she said, her voice low but firm. When no one else believed in you. When you had no money, no stability, no direction. I was there. Daniel didn't respond. I believed in you, she continued. I carried us when you couldn't. I gave up my own plans so you could chase yours. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. And now, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, you're telling me I'm disposable. That's not what I said, he replied, though his tone lacked conviction. It's exactly what you're saying, she answered. Silence filled the space again, heavier this time. Then Daniel said the one thing that would stay with her long after this moment passed. You were nothing before me, he said, his voice cold, detached. And you'll be nothing without me. Angela froze. For a second, it felt like the world had stopped. Not because of the volume of his words, but because of their meaning. Everything she had done. Everything she had been. Reduced to nothing in a single sentence. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply nodded, as if accepting something she hadn't known she needed to accept. Okay, she said quietly. Daniel seemed almost surprised by her response. Okay? Angela walked past him, her movements calm, deliberate. She picked up a small suitcase from the closet and placed it on the bed. What are you doing? He asked. You gave me a week, she replied, opening the suitcase. I won't need that long. He watched her for a moment, then looked away. Angela folded her clothes carefully, placing only what she needed inside. No hesitation. No second thoughts. When she finished, she zipped the suitcase and lifted it. At the door, she paused. For a moment, it seemed like she might say something more. But she didn't. She opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind her. The sound echoed louder than it should have. And just like that, everything was gone. The rain didn't stop that night. Angela walked without direction, the sound of her suitcase wheels dragging unevenly against the wet pavement. The cold seeped through her clothes, settling into her bones, but she barely noticed. Her mind felt distant, like it had stepped away from her body to avoid what was happening. She didn't call anyone. Not because she had no one, but because she couldn't bring herself to explain. There are moments in life when pain becomes too heavy for words, when even the simplest question, what happened, feels impossible to answer. So she kept walking. By the time the streets emptied and the lights in the buildings dimmed, she found herself sitting inside her car, parked under a flickering street lamp. The windshield blurred with rain, distorting the world outside into something unrecognizable. Her suitcase rested in the back seat. This was all she had now. Angela leaned her head back and closed her eyes. For a brief moment, she imagined opening them and finding herself back in her home, in her bed, with everything unchanged. But when she opened them again, the reality didn't shift. The silence inside the car was overwhelming. She reached for her phone, scrolling through contacts she didn't call. Names of people who knew her as someone else, someone stable, someone secure, someone whose life made sense. Not this version. Not the woman sitting alone in a car at midnight, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Her grip tightened around the phone before she set it aside. I'll figure it out, she whispered, though the words felt fragile. The first night passed without sleep. The second wasn't much better. Angela spent the next morning driving from one place to another, searching for something affordable, something temporary. Most places required deposits she couldn't manage immediately. Others were already taken. By afternoon, exhaustion began to settle in. She parked near a small diner, the kind she used to pass without noticing. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the scent of coffee and fried food. It felt like stepping into another world, one where people still laughed, still talked, still existed without their lives collapsing. She sat in a corner booth, wrapping her hands around a cup of coffee she barely drank. The waitress approached, offering a polite smile. You okay, honey? Angela hesitated, then nodded.
Yeah,
Just tired. The woman studied her for a moment, as if she could see beyond the answer, but didn't press further. Let me know if you need anything. Angela watched her walk away, then looked around the diner. Conversations blended together, forming a steady background noise that felt oddly comforting. For a moment, she allowed herself to sit there without thinking. But reality returned quickly. She needed a place to stay. She needed money. She needed a plan. And right now, she had none. The next few days blurred together. She found a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind that charged by the night and didn't ask questions. The room was small, the walls thin, the bed barely comfortable. But it had a door that locked, and for now, that was enough. Angela spent hours searching for work, applying to places she never imagined she would consider. Retail, cleaning services, small offices. Anything that would bring in income quickly. Rejections came faster than responses. You're overqualified. We're looking for someone with recent experience in this field. We'll call you. They never did. Each response chipped away at her confidence, at the identity she had built over the years. She had been stable once. Reliable. Capable. Now, she felt invisible. One evening, after another long day of unanswered applications, Angela sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the floor. Her reflection in the mirror across the room caught her attention. She looked different. Not just tired. Not just worn down. Smaller. Like pieces of her had been stripped away, leaving behind someone she didn't fully recognize. She stood slowly, walking toward the mirror. For a moment, she just stared. Then she spoke, her voice barely audible. Who are you now? The question lingered in the quiet room. There was no immediate answer. Her mind drifted back to Daniel's words. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing without me. The sentence echoed louder now, filling the space around her. Angela's expression tightened. No, she said softly, almost instinctively. She shook her head, as if trying to push the thought away. But it lingered. The doubt crept in slowly, wrapping around her thoughts, whispering questions she didn't want to face. What if he was right? What if everything she had was tied to him? What if there was nothing left without that life? Angela turned away from the mirror, pacing the small room. Her chest felt tight, her breathing uneven. For a moment, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her at once, the loss, the uncertainty, the fear of starting over with nothing. She sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. And for the first time since she left, she cried. Not quietly. Not controlled. The kind of tears that come from deep within, carrying everything with them, every memory, every sacrifice, every broken piece of trust. She didn't know how long she stayed like that. Minutes. Hours. Time didn't matter. Eventually, the tears slowed, leaving behind a heavy silence. Angela lifted her head, her eyes red, her breathing unsteady. She looked around the room again. Same walls. Same bed. Same reality. Nothing had changed. And then, something shifted. Not outside. Inside. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a small, steady realization. No one was coming to fix this. No one was going to knock on that door and offer her a way out. No one was going to rebuild her life for her. If anything was going to change, it had to come from her. Angela wiped her face, taking a slow breath. She stood up again, this time more firmly. Her reflection in the mirror still looked tired, still looked worn, but there was something else now. Awareness. She stepped closer, meeting her own gaze. You're not done, she said quietly. The words didn't feel powerful yet. They didn't carry confidence or certainty. But they were real. And for now, that was enough. Angela turned away, reaching for her bag. She pulled out a notebook she hadn't used in years, flipping it open to a blank page. For a moment, she stared at it, unsure of where to begin. Then she picked up a pen. And she wrote the first thing that came to mind. Start again. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a solution. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, that's all it takes. The first morning Angela woke up with intention, nothing around her had changed, but she had. The motel room still smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. The curtains still blocked out most of the light. The world outside still moved on without noticing her existence. But this time, she didn't lie there staring at the ceiling. She sat up. No hesitation. No second thoughts. She reached for the notebook on the nightstand and opened it to the words she had written the night before. Start again. Angela looked at the phrase for a long moment, then grabbed a pen and added another line beneath it. No excuses. She closed the notebook and stood. That day, she didn't search for the perfect opportunity. She searched for any opportunity. By mid-morning, she had secured a job cleaning offices. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what she had imagined for herself years ago. But it was something steady, something immediate. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a firm tone and sharp eyes, looked her over briefly. You ever done this kind of work before? She asked. Angela shook her head. No. But I learn fast. The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. You start tonight. Don't be late. I won't be. And she wasn't. That night, Angela stepped into an empty office building long after everyone else had gone home. The silence was different from the one in her motel room. It wasn't heavy. It was focused. She moved from desk to desk, wiping surfaces, emptying trash bins, cleaning floors. The work was repetitive, but it kept her mind steady. No overthinking. No spiraling. Just movement. Days turned into a routine. Mornings were spent searching for additional income. Afternoons were for rest or small tasks. Nights were for cleaning. The paycheck wasn't much, but it was consistent. Angela tracked every dollar. Every expense. Every possibility. One afternoon, while sitting in a small public library, she overheard a conversation at the next table. You're telling me you made that much just baking from home? A woman asked, disbelief clear in her voice. The other woman nodded. It's not overnight, but people love homemade stuff. You just have to know how to market it. Angela didn't mean to listen, but something about the conversation caught her attention. Baking. It was something she knew. Something she had always been good at. Years ago, she used to bake for friends, for small gatherings. People would compliment her, ask if she ever thought about selling. She never took it seriously. Back then, her focus had been somewhere else. Now, things were different. That night, after her shift, Angela sat at the small table in her motel room, staring at her notebook. She wrote one word at the top of the page. Baking. Underneath it, she listed everything she could think of. Recipes she knew. Ingredients she needed. Places she could sell. It wasn't a business plan. Not yet. But it was a direction. The next day, she used a portion of her savings, carefully measured, to buy basic supplies. Flour. Sugar. Eggs. Butter. Nothing extra. Just enough to start. The motel didn't have a proper kitchen, but it had a small setup. Limited space. Limited tools. Angela worked with what she had. The first batch wasn't perfect. The oven temperature was inconsistent. The measurements felt slightly off. She adjusted. Tried again. Better. By the third attempt, she had something she was proud of. Simple cupcakes. Nothing extravagant. But they tasted right. That evening, she packed a small box and took it to the diner she had visited days earlier. The same waitress noticed her. Hey, she said with a warm smile. You look a little better today. Angela returned the smile, holding out the box. I brought these. Just wanted to see if anyone might be interested. The waitress opened it, raising an eyebrow. You made these? Angela nodded. Yes. She picked one up, took a bite, and paused. Then she looked at Angela again, this time with interest. These are good, she said. Really good. Angela felt something shift inside her. Not excitement. Not yet. But possibility. I don't know if you sell things here, Angela said carefully, but I'm trying to start something small. I can offer a fair price. The waitress thought for a moment, then gestured toward the back. Let me talk to the owner. Wait here. Minutes passed. Angela stood near the counter, her hands clasped, her mind steady but alert. When the waitress returned, she nodded. He's willing to try a small batch. No promises. If they sell, we'll talk again. Angela didn't hesitate. That's all I need. The first order was small. Barely enough to make a noticeable difference. But it sold. Every single piece. When she returned a few days later, the owner looked at her differently. Same quantity, he asked. Angela shook her head. Double. He nodded. Let's see what happens. What happened was simple. They sold again. And again. Angela didn't celebrate. She didn't rush. She just kept going. Balancing two jobs wasn't easy. Nights blurred into early mornings. Sleep became limited. Energy stretched thin. But she stayed focused. Every dollar she earned from baking went back into supplies. Better ingredients. Better tools. She upgraded slowly, carefully. No risks she couldn't manage. Weeks turned into months. The motel room eventually became temporary again, not because she had to leave, but because she chose to. Angela moved into a small studio apartment. Nothing fancy. But it had a proper kitchen. Space. Freedom. The first night there, she stood in the middle of the room, looking around. It wasn't the life she had before. It wasn't the home she lost. But it was hers. Completely. She placed her notebook on the counter and opened it. The page that once held a single word now held plans, numbers, ideas. Growth. Angela picked up a pen and added another line. Keep going. No dramatic declaration. No emotional speech. Just quiet determination. Because this time, she wasn't building something for someone else. She was building it for herself. And she wasn't going to stop. 7 years had a way of reshaping everything. Angela stood in front of the large glass windows of her office, watching the city move beneath her. Morning light stretched across the buildings, reflecting off steel and glass, casting a quiet glow over everything she had built. The journey from that motel room to this moment had not been fast, and it had never been easy. Her small baking venture had grown steadily, first supplying one diner, then several cafes, then expanding into custom orders, events, and eventually a full-scale brand. What began with a borrowed oven and measured risk had turned into something stable, something respected. She didn't rush growth. She understood it. Step by step, decision by decision, she built something that could stand without fear of collapse. Her company now occupied 3 floors in a modern building. A production kitchen operated with precision. A team managed logistics, marketing, and partnerships. Her name, once spoken quietly in doubt, now carried weight in rooms where decisions mattered. Angela adjusted the sleeve of her blazer and turned away from the window as her assistant stepped in. You have a meeting at 11, she said, holding a tablet. Property acquisition. The file's already on your desk. Angela nodded. Thank you, Claire. When the door closed, she walked over to her desk and opened the file. The property was familiar, not in detail, but in feeling. A large residential estate, recently listed under financial distress. The photos showed a house that had once been carefully maintained but now carried signs of neglect. Angela studied the address. Something about it pulled at her memory. She leaned back slightly, thinking. Then it clicked. Not immediately, not with force, but enough. The neighborhood. The structure. The layout. Her expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened. She closed the file, then reopened it, reviewing the details more carefully. The owner's name appeared on the second page. Daniel Brooks. Angela sat still. No shock. No visible reaction. Just recognition. Time had passed, but not enough to erase everything. She closed the file again and placed it neatly on her desk. At 11, she entered the conference room with the same composure she carried into every meeting. Her team was already seated, along with a real estate agent reviewing documents. Good morning, Angela said, taking her place. The discussion began with numbers. Market value, repair costs, long-term investment potential. The property, despite its condition, held strong value due to its location. Owner is looking for a quick sale, the agent explained. Financial issues. He's willing to negotiate below market. Angela listened without interruption. Any competing offers, she asked. None serious so far. Angela nodded once, then closed the folder. Proceed, she said. No hesitation. No second thoughts. Just a decision. The process moved quickly after that. Contracts were reviewed, terms finalized, signatures exchanged. Within days, the property was hers. Angela didn't visit immediately. There was no urgency. But a week later, with the paperwork complete and ownership transferred, she drove there alone. The house looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically, but in presence. The paint had faded. The garden, once neat, had grown uneven. Windows that used to reflect warmth now looked dim. Angela stepped out of the car, her heels quiet against the driveway. For a moment, she simply stood there. Not remembering. Observing. Then she walked toward the door. It opened before she could reach for it. Daniel stood there. He looked older. Not just in age, but in posture, in expression. The confidence he once carried had worn down, replaced by something less certain. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Recognition passed between them without effort. Angela, he said finally. She met his gaze. Daniel. His eyes searched her face, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one he had known. You own this place now, he asked. Yes. The simplicity of her answer seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. He stepped back slightly, allowing space between them. I didn't know, he said. They didn't tell me who the buyer was. Angela nodded once. It wasn't necessary. A pause followed. Daniel glanced around, then back at her. Things didn't go the way I expected. Angela didn't respond. He let out a breath, running a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture, though it carried none of the old confidence. I made some bad decisions, he continued. Business deals that didn't work. Investments that failed. And, he hesitated. The rest didn't last either. Angela remained still, her expression neutral. I lost everything, he said quietly. The words hung there, not seeking sympathy, just stating fact. Angela looked past him briefly, taking in the space behind him. The house that had once represented stability now felt empty. Then she returned her attention to him. I see, she said. Daniel shifted slightly, as if expecting more, questions, reactions, something. When none came, he spoke again. I heard about you, he said. Your business. What you've built. Angela didn't confirm or deny. It wasn't necessary. He gave a small, uncertain nod. You did well. Another pause. Then, more carefully, I wasn't fair to you. Angela held his gaze, waiting. I thought, he began, then stopped, searching for words. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had control over everything. He let out a quiet breath. I was wrong. The admission was simple, but it carried weight. Angela listened without interruption. I made a mistake, he said finally. There it was. Clear. Direct. But not enough. Angela stepped forward slightly, her voice calm, steady. No, she said. You made a choice. Daniel looked at her, absorbing the distinction. Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Final. I don't expect anything, he said after a moment. I just wanted to say that. Angela nodded once. Then she turned toward the house, taking a few steps before pausing. This place will be renovated, she said. It has potential. Daniel followed her gaze, then nodded faintly. It always did. Angela didn't look back at him this time. She walked toward the door, her steps measured, her posture unchanged. At the threshold, she stopped briefly, not out of hesitation, but closure. Then she stepped inside. Behind her, Daniel remained where he was. No argument. No request. Nothing left to say. The door closed quietly. And with it, everything that had once held her back finally stayed where it belonged. In the past.